And welcome back to the NFLandU podcast, everybody. It's Friday, November 27th, the day after Thanksgiving, and we are in week 12, what they call the fun part of the regular season. What many people say the regular season finally starts here. I'm your host, as always, Hayden Vassar, joined by Mr. Mark Hogan. Mark, how you doing, my man?
No, I'm good. It's you I'm worried about. I hope you didn't eat too much turkey and good stuff on Thursday for Thanksgiving.
I got into a turkey coma. I'm just gonna warn you people now. I'm taking a full food coma nap. That's how it's gonna go.
How big is Thanksgiving for you guys? I've never really gotten a proper grasp. I thought for a long time it was Christmas 2.0. But how big on the calendar is it? Or is it more like Halloween?
I say it's like Christmas 2.0. I think it's one of the bigger ones for my family, at least. What we do.
It's so crazy that you guys just have this made up holiday. Not made up, but for
made up. Okay.
As far as the rest of the world is concerned.
Yeah, you guys don't do it.
It doesn't appear on our calendar, so I've never had a full understanding of it. I thought that it was supposed to be gifts and stuff. I guess it's just a day off that everyone hangs around and lounges around.
Yeah, we just get fat, eat food, and then watch some bad teams play football, and that's what we're going to do this year.
Yeah, definitely. Suppose we're definitely losing a good
we're going to get into that.
Before we do that, I should mention that we have our guest pickers for this week, or do you want to introduce them, Hayden?
Oh, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. We have the great people from Next Man Up podcast. Mike, Liam, and Phil will be our guest pickers this week, and they helped us pick their games. You can find them on Twitter at Next Man Up, all lowercase letters. And big thank you for them. I know it wasn't easy. You know, they're Eagles fans and their season hasn't been the best right now. We'll get into that game in a little bit, but huge thanks to them for being our guest picker this week.
Yeah, it's actually Next Man Up _
Oh, thank you.
But I spotted them during the week. They look to be getting up some good content. We'll get into that a bit later on when we're talking about the Eagles. But yeah, a Scottish man, an Irish man, an English man. It's kind of a cool setup for a podcast. So go check it out. If you're an Eagles fan, but maybe if you're a Dallas fan over the next few weeks, it'd be a good one to listen to as they seem to implode.
Yeah, just seemingly implode. And we'll definitely hit that one here in a couple minutes. To be brutally honest with you guys, that was the game we were planning to start this show with, but some stuff happened before we started recording, and we're going to hit that off the top here as we get into game previews. And it's breaking news in case you haven't heard it. The late night Thursday night game, there were supposed to be 3 games on Thursday. There's now only going to be 2, as the Pittsburgh at Baltimore game has been moved to Sunday due to the Ravens having an outbreak of COVID that they have yet to get under control. And yeah, it's not looking good. The news broke at about noon Eastern, Wednesday-ish. And the initial gut reaction from everybody from the Ravens side was, okay, it was very calm and controlled and everybody was okay with it, basically because, it gives them some time to get healthy. And the Steelers, on the other hand, on social media, were very upset. In case any of you haven't been on Twitter yet, they were righteously angry, a lot of them using words I can't repeat on this show. And, rightfully so. I mean, their schedule has been really messed up by COVID instances this year, and not even from their own fault. I mean, remember the Tennessee debacle? Their whole schedule had to be rearranged. They had to take their bye week early because the Titans couldn't get it under control. And now they have to give up this primetime game on Thanksgiving because the Ravens can't get COVID under control. So the Steelers are very hopping mad right now, and that's a fun way to phrase it. And for the Ravens, this is kind of good because according to multiple reports, if the game had gone through on Thursday, they would have been without most of their offensive line, including at least their starting center and a couple other guys. So for the Ravens, it's a chance to get right and help them get healthy for Sunday. But it's just, I saw a couple Steelers players say this on Twitter, that the NFL's COVID rules, they've just been hit or miss. They haven't been consistent. Because remember the Thursday night game a couple weeks ago between the Niners and the Packers, the Niners had to go out there without most of their starting lineup because they were all in COVID protocol and the NFL made them play. Well, the same situation is unfolding in Baltimore, and they said, no, we'll move it to Sunday. We'll move it to Sunday so everybody can get healthy. And a lot of the Steelers players were pointing to that on Twitter and saying, what's going on here? This is complete BS. Could you guys at least keep it, consistent with what you're trying to do? And I agree with them. If anybody's been screwed by the COVID protocols this year, it's literally been the Steelers, despite their record. I mean, their schedule's been messed up so much by it. But I've ranted so much about COVID here because we really don't know if we're going to get this game this Sunday at all. And it's hard to really predict what kind of atmosphere it's going to be in Baltimore, or who even is going to suit up for the Ravens. So let's say we do get the game in the afternoon, like how it's scheduled to be now. I guess I would take the Steelers if it's to be played, only because we literally don't know what Ravens are going to be healthy for that game. But as of right now, the game that was supposed to be my perfect turkey night nap after I've eaten too much turkey has been taken away from me. And I'm very sad about it. And so are the Steelers. But if the game is to be played, I'm going to take the Steelers in Baltimore on Sunday, if that makes sense.
I think, Hayden, that the Steelers are only really upset because this is a division opponent getting a break, whereas they wanted to absolutely pummel them. I mean, they've gotten a long week now or a regular week versus having a short week, which they won't have. So, like, what's wrong with that? And the first time round, they got an extra. They had, the Monday game instead of playing on a Sunday, which gave them an extra day to prepare for. I suppose, who was it that got flexed that day for the Tennessee game? I'm not really too sure, but I don't see too many like negatives for this. They've just lost a Thursday night game, so I think they're only whinging because it's a division opponent. And to make sense of it all, I mean, we're not in week 4 anymore. We are in week 12, and there's those. I'd rather this game gets moved than we have to have an 8th playoff team because it's just. So I'm glad the NFL is just making this game go ahead one way or another, at least giving it a chance. And I think those other teams, I'm sympathetic for the 49ers, don't get me wrong, but we just need to realize what point of the season that we're at now, and we're trying to save it versus have to make up at the end of the year, because those rules originally were made for, if we have to have an extra week in January and all this kind of stuff. But as we get closer, we're almost through it. It's just, force one game through, and it might save a bit of a season versus a lot of hassle down the way, because I certainly don't want to see an extra week introduced and everyone, because what would Pittsburgh do then if they have to make this game up at the end of the year and they essentially lose their bye week that they've earned by being the number 1 seed? What are they going to be complaining about then, So just get it done now.
Like, if anybody's to be complaining, it should be the Ravens, actually, because they have to play next week on Thursday Night Football against the Cowboys. So they would have to play Sunday and then go into a Thursday night game immediately afterward. So the Ravens' schedule is suddenly all up in the air as well. But it's just a sucky situation. But this is football this year. And like I said, if a game is to be played, and that's a key word at this point, if it is to be played, I guess I'll take the Steelers at Baltimore.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, they were supposed to go a Sunday into a Thursday anyway this week. So it doesn't make 100% sense to me that teams are complaining like they are. The teams that have the real complaints are the 49ers that didn't get let off the hook, or the Raiders, So I don't have too much sympathy for Pittsburgh sitting where they're sitting right now.
Right. Amen to that. So that's the big breaking news, that the Pittsburgh and Baltimore game has been moved from Thursday Night Football, which was supposed to be the main event of Thanksgiving, to Sunday afternoon. And now we can get into the meat of the show like we had planned to. And Mark, where would you like to go first?
Firstly, I'll give you my pick because I think it's a formality
really
that I'd probably pick Pittsburgh in it. But again, it is a divisional game. It's an interesting one. It is at Pittsburgh. If it was at Baltimore, maybe you give some more trouble. But I think it's a bit of a formality. But we did say, when's that going to end, that streak that they're on, unless they're going to go 16-0. So that would be in the back of my head. But no, Pittsburgh for that. But we'll move on to the game that we were going to start with, which is Philadelphia. I don't want to bring up the same thing the whole time about my dislike for Wentz. Not my dislike for him. I absolutely like him. And I had this conversation with our guest pickers the other day, the Next Man Up podcast. We were just DMing a little bit, and it was immediately after they had lost on the weekend, and maybe that was a bad time to catch the guys. And he said plenty coming up on Monday's podcast, and they seem to be on the boat that Carson Wentz is to blame. His actual words to me were, it's not as I'm paraphrasing here, but this is done. This era seems to be closing.
Oh, wow.
And I wouldn't be on that side of the fence at all. I think it's an absolute hiccup. But my reply to it was that they seem to be like New England this year, that they're just doomed to fail, that they didn't have a lot to work with. And I put this to my younger brother, who's a Philadelphia fan, and Paul said to me, like, I trust in Carson Wentz. I trust him going forward. The money that we have put into him going forward, you have to, pay him a lot of money otherwise, or deal with all salary cap implications. But it's also he was in the side of things, like maybe Jalen Hurts against against Seattle could work like Dallas when they put in what's your guy's name?
Which one? We've had a couple quarterbacks.
The nobody guy.
Ben DiNucci, Gary Gilbert?
DiNucci.
Okay. Gucci
He said,
Bendanucci.
he said, he said, look what happened with Ben DiNucci on Sunday Night Football, that they came out and they started playing a load of trick plays and no one knew what was up for the first half of the game. And they're like, oh, is that it's going to pull that one over the Eagles? Now, it didn't happen, but maybe you can do that with Jalen Hurts. We talked about last week how we don't really know what the plan for Hurts is at the moment. Like, anytime he goes in, seems to just signal it's a run play. Whereas now, if you actually plan for him for a full game, but then Doug Peterson is all over the place with his whole on Tuesday. He says that, or was it on Monday? He said, if you put in Carson Wentz, it doesn't give the right signal, which, like, it's crazy because then everyone comes and writes about, oh, it's not giving up on the season. It's showing that you're trying to save the season. And if you're able to call the problem Carson Wentz, call it Carson Wentz. Then he goes out on Wednesday and he's asked the same question. And it took him like the question had to be asked 3 times before he'd say, no, I can't see Jalen Hurts playing on Monday Night Football. So it's just a mess for the team. That was one place that I would fault Doug Peterson. He should have just been like, no, guys, you've asked me this before. We're saying with Carson Wentz. Like, maybe he doesn't want to admit all the problems I put to Paul. I just don't think that they have the receivers, and Paul was saying Fulgham. But again, like, he bounced around the league for a reason. Obviously, Ashton Jeffries lost a step. It's like Sam Darnold in New York. You can't rate him unless he has this full array of good wide receivers, and it's hard for Wentz right now.
Right. And you stole the words right out of my mouth. That comment by Peterson the other day of that gives a signal that we're giving up on the season. I really didn't like that because Mark, I've defended Wentz on this show before, and I've defended him since he came into the league. And I remember on the show, you asked me earlier about a potential quarterback change a couple weeks ago. And I said, it doesn't matter who you put behind that offensive line, they're going to struggle. And I still believe that, but there are some plays by Wentz where it's just like, dude, you are not helping your case whatsoever. And it's getting rough in Philly. And I'm glad to hear that your brother is at least defending him somewhat. I think that's the first positive thing I've heard about Wentz these past couple months at this point. It's a rough one. And I think if he goes out there and has another bad showing like he did in Cleveland, because that was bad. And no, it wasn't all on him, but it was certainly not helping his cause. If he goes out there and does that on prime time, Doug Peterson is going to have a lot to answer to in terms of the media, a lot to answer to.
Yeah, I don't think it undermines Carson Wentz by taking him off for a game and letting him stew and recover or whatever. Like, I don't think it's the Nick Foles, Mitchell Trubisky scenario playing out again. I just think that Carson Wentz is a bit better than Mitchell Trubisky, despite where they were selected in their respective drafts.
Yeah.
To bring it to Seattle, it's not the best matchup for Wentz now versus had he met them a few weeks ago, or Jalen Hurts if he ends up starting this game. It's not the best for Philadelphia because as a Cardinals fan, I was able to see myself that Thursday night game last week that Seattle is beginning to turn the corner on defense, it seems. Since Carlos Dunlap came in, he's had an impact. He's had as many sacks in 3 games with Seattle as he had with Cincinnati, but the stat that I want to bring up is he's had as many sacks with Seattle so far in his 3 games as Jadeveon Clowney had with the team last year, and he was supposed to, like, you know, 3 sacks. I love the reaction. Catch it on YouTube. The look of shock on Hayden's face there.
Drive by burn.
The impact that he's had has obviously helped all the guys around him, Jerron Reed, Poona Ford. You know, it's a knock-on effect. And the longer that this goes on, it's like the more pressure that you bring means less blitzing and more guys in the secondary to stay in there. So, yeah, for a team that allows as many sacks as Philadelphia and for Wentz to be turning the ball over as much as it has, like, you can't undo the impact that the first few weeks had on that pass defense in Seattle. But they're certainly starting to look better. And while they're not world beaters, there's plenty there now that you could be able to doubt yourself a bit looking forward to Seattle.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead and give my pick here. I was really impressed by Seattle's defense on that Thursday night game. I feel like that was the reason why they beat the Cardinals, and I can't believe I said it that night, and I'm saying it again. Their defense won them that game, and I think it'll win it again considering how bad the Eagles have been on offense. I'm taking Seattle on Monday night.
Yeah, sorry to our guest pickers. I stuck with the Bucs last week on behalf of Across the Pond pod, but yeah, sorry, guys. I'll be going with Seattle in this one. And sorry to myself as a Cardinals fan, of course.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry's all around. All right, so that's the Monday night game. Mark, and if you're cool with this one, you mentioned a couple names in there, and that kind of goes into my point into this next game. And you guys are going to have to follow me on this one because it's a bit of a reach. Because the 7-3 Cleveland Browns, who have won 2 in a row, are going to Jacksonville to take on the 1-9 Jaguars, who have lost 9 in a row. And yes, we all are aware that Cleveland had another rainy game in Cleveland when we said it would be good. We know it's a streak, but they're going to Jacksonville now, and they should have clean weather. And if you're mad at us for this, I'm sorry, and blame the Weather Channel.
So, you know, blame the Weather Channel. I said that on the show last week. I said, I've checked this. It's according to the Weather Channel, and I should have taken a screenshot. That was my mistake. That was my one and only mistake. That was just to not take that screenshot to have proof that the Weather Channel said that the weather be fine.
Listen, the Weather Channel can suck it because we are under the impression that we'll finally get good weather this week, and that's what we're sticking to. And if it happens, it happens, and please don't blame us. Anyway, back to this game. The Jacksonville Jaguars are kind of in a pretty ugly state right now. Jake Luton came off a very terrible game against the Steelers defense, and that's not necessarily his fault. They're the best defense in the league. He turned the ball over 4 times. And the one thing Doug Marrone said after Jake Luton took over from Minshew because he was hurt was that the only way Luton would get benched if he played poorly. Well, he played pretty poorly, and he played poorly the game before, and Doug Marrone finally decided to pull the poor rookie and in place of Mike Glennon. Now, follow me on my circle chart here with my fingers. So Mike Glennon right here in 2017, if you're watching the video show, he gets benched for Mitch Trubisky in Chicago. Mitch Trubisky gets benched for Nick Foles later this season. Nick Foles gets relieved by Gardner Minshew early last season after Foles breaks his collarbone. Then Gardner Minshew gets relieved by Jake Luton because Minshew gets hurt and he hurts his finger. And now Jake Luton gets relieved by Mike Glennon because Jake Luton's playing terrible, which reinforces the argument that time is a flat circle, and Mike Glennon is now your quarterback in Jacksonville because, you know, bad quarterbacks are fun. That's not the only thing going on in Jacksonville besides their quarterback issues. They have 3 defensive coaches who aren't going to be available for the game this weekend due to COVID protocols. One of those coaches is also their defensive coordinator, which is not a good sign. So Doug Marrone is apparently going to be calling the plays on defense for the team. So it'll be interesting to see how different that defense looks than how it normally does, because the Jacksonville Jaguars have been one of the worst defenses in the league so far. Now, to the Browns, they have a bit of an issue as well. In case you missed it, Myles Garrett missed the last game due to COVID protocols. He hasn't been cleared yet, so his status as of this moment is unknown. But a bigger story is that cornerback Denzel Ward, who has been playing as one of the best corners in the entire league this year, leads the league in passes defensed with 15. He jacked up his calf in the previous game against Philly. He's going to be out for a couple weeks. They have his status as day-to-day. So that's a big blow to this the Browns defense. And that'll be something to watch how they come out and play. But against this Jaguars offense with Mike Glennon making his first start of the year, they should be able to handle business. And in a clean weather environment, that's what we're praying for, people. We should finally see some fireworks from this Browns offense and have Nick Chubb, run for 150, have, Baker toss a couple touchdowns. This should be a game that the Browns handle easily in Jacksonville. And I'm taking the Browns to win.
Yeah, I mean, hat tip obviously to Mark Long from the Associated Press, who I believe was the first one to go up with the circle of life at that quarterback position.
It's a circle.
I certainly don't think it gets much better for Jacksonville. It certainly gets better for Jacksonville having Mike Glenn in, but it's not something to really write on about. That we just previewed a game where there's a viable backup sitting behind Carson Wentz, whereas in Jacksonville it just seems to be miserable quarterback play for umpteen years at this point. Jeez, is Blake Bortles still the most successful quarterback in recent memory for that team? It's crazy.
Oh, so gross.
Yeah, Mike Lennon was with the Cardinals for a bit, and if you thought he was, I wanted to give him a chance after the Tampa Bay outing. I know then he signed with Chicago for the big money deal that no one quite understood. But I'm shocked that he's still in the league. Like, to say that makes him the third quarterback, I guess, with Jacksonville. I'm surprised he was even a QB3. That it's an easy pick, this one. Cleveland, absolutely 100%. Bad weather or not, we're still getting the wins, aren't we, with Cleveland? So
yeah, let's go good weather. That's what we're pulling for this weekend. All right, that's the
good weather or not. That's going to be an ugly looking game for the Jags offense, you'd imagine. So it doesn't matter what weather they get. At least they have an excuse if they have the bad weather.
Yeah, at least they can cover it up a bit if it's raining and hailing and whatnot. All right, so that's the Cleveland-Jacksonville game. Mark, where would you like to go next?
Yeah, I suppose we're staying in that division, aren't we? The
Ooh.
AFC South, if I'm right, with what could be one of the games of the week. We've been looking forward to this one for a couple of weeks since the other side of this fixture for Tennessee and Indianapolis took place. And, we didn't write Indianapolis off before the season began, like a lot of people, which is nice to brag about now.
Just get that dig in there. Just get that
Right.
dig in.
For any listeners that still listen who gave out to me for being on Indianapolis or just complained behind my back about me liking the Indianapolis Colts. But
his DMs are still open, people. His DMs are still open.
I'm going to go chasing, I believe, this week because I haven't got too many apologies. But no, to be serious, look, we've a bit of a distaste for Tennessee at the moment. Mike Vrabel's attitude to COVID hasn't been the best, and I just didn't like what he did on encouraging his team to meet in the middle of the field against Baltimore the other day. And tongue in cheek, I suppose, I don't know what he expected trying to shake hands with Harbaugh after that game.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he was rejected nonetheless. I just thought it was a bit classless, really. But yeah, at the same time, I was rooting for Baltimore, but I was happy when Derrick Henry won because I had a bet on it. So it's crazy that he's had two big wins in overtime. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But firstly, Indianapolis, who I was super impressed with on the weekend, like they were trucking along as this team that I thought was good, but I really thought was on the outside of that playoff bubble. Good enough to be making the playoffs, but once we reached the playoffs, that we were going to write them off because Phillip Rivers was too stiff or the offense wasn't explosive. The other day, it was like they turned a corner. Phillip Rivers' career has been, of late, been known for him throwing away games. Just whatever happened in LA, he was literally throwing the ball to the other team to lose games. And it was absolutely miserable for a team in 2019 that should have been making the playoffs. Like, they were absolutely shocking. He ends up losing or leaving finally from the LA Chargers, and he comes here, and I not that it was vintage. I don't know if you have vintage. He's such a sporadic quarterback, but I read that was his 13th comeback from 14 points behind more, which is like either best or second best in NFL history now. I think it was something about Rodgers was in that article as well, that maybe he holds the record. But you have a run game that seems to have to work. One of them's going to be a hot hand between Naheem Hines or Jonathan Taylor each week. Like, I thought it was, especially after Marlon Mack went down they're onto their second and third technically, and it seems to just get across the line. And then the Pittman, isn't it? Just the wide receiver seems to be getting open. And of course, we've marveled about that defense. Big thing, though, this week is DeForest Buckner has now been added to the COVID list, and the knock-on effect that he has is like one of the greatest in the leagues. Like I was just talking about Carlos Dunlap there a second ago with Seattle, but what DeForest Buckner brings to that defense is huge. So going into this game, it's going to be monstrous, really. And when you have a monster the other side of the field, Derrick Henry, it doesn't help that you're not going to be at full strength, especially in a game as important as this. And what is really noticeable to me is the two teams' second halves. Now, there's two ways you can look at it. They both have Baltimore as a shared opponent, and Indianapolis came out in the first half and held their own to Baltimore and lost in the second half, whereas Tennessee played Baltimore and won in the second half. And a large part of that was Derrick Henry got rolling. Now, Derrick Henry's numbers, and thankfully I was able to get these per Pro Football Reference, which I'm now signed up to, and it's some of the best money you could spend. I think it's like a €10 or $12 a month to get these stats. And it's Derrick Henry has in the first half 3.9 yards a carry. That goes up to 5.4 in the second half, which is nuts. Like, he's getting an extra 140 yards, or he has 140 yards extra, but he's doing on less carries, which is just phenomenal from Derrick Henry. But then you look at the Colts, I have to get this right now. The Colts yards per carries, their touchdowns, their pass completion rate, defense, I'm talking about, is better in the second half than the first half. So here's two teams that get better as the game goes on. And you only have to watch that Baltimore game to see how Derrick Henry's an example. Or the other game is obviously the Houston game, that Derrick Henry can just take over in the second half. And it's going to be huge for Indianapolis's defense with or without DeForest Buckner to be able to keep him in check for the whole game if they're going to win this one.
Yeah, because, you remember that Thursday night game, and it felt a little fluky at the time. I mean, they got like a special teams touchdown the Colts did, and a lot of other things went in their favor to help them win that game. If I remember correctly, Henry rushed for 100 yards in that game, but it never felt like, he was taken over at any point. But Mark's right. The Colts are starting to round into shape, and it's not just that Michael Pittman's getting open. The explosive plays that we were begging this offense to bring about, they're suddenly starting to show up these last couple weeks, specifically from Michael Pittman. They had like a 30-yard touchdown against the Packers, and there was a 40-yard deep pass to Michael Pittman on that Thursday night game that we just mentioned. The Colts are starting to round into shape, and I still have questions about that Titans defense. I'm still not entirely sold on them as a unit. So I'm going to ride the hot hand. I'm going to take the Colts to win this game and move solely into first place in the AFC South this Sunday.
Yeah, I was more confident with this pick back in 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I certainly think that coming off that game, it was explosive for the Colts. Of course, I'd picked Green Bay, and I was like, how has this happened again? So I'm probably part of the curse there. Another big comeback loss for yours truly. But I'll definitely take Indianapolis in this one. Mm-hmm. I know our guest pickers, add next man up. I wanted to get their Twitter right. I know our guest pickers have gone for Tennessee, so I'm glad to put them on an island. Hopefully we'll be able to get a win over a guest for once. But
we're finally going to do it. We're going to do it this week, people.
One of the most important games of the year, really, because these teams are getting a bit hot, and it has obviously huge implications going down the line.
Yeah, first place in the South on the line. It's probably one of the games I'm most looking forward to on Sunday, and that was not just before they moved Steelers and Ravens, but even after they moved Steelers and Ravens. I'm still probably most excited about this game because of what it can possibly mean down the line. It should be a fun one.
Yeah, and Indianapolis could implode again and put egg on my face and stuff like that. But yeah, they just look so good the other day that it would be frightening, really. And in fairness, like Tennessee have scraped by some games. Again, I just mentioned that Houston one that just stood with me the whole time, that they really played to their opponents. And will they be able to beat Indianapolis now? Obviously, they didn't a couple of weeks ago or even 10 days ago, whatever it was. But the big thing really is DeForest Buckner. I suppose we'll know more. He'll do a test tomorrow, Saturday. So, we'll wait and see. But it's definitely, like I said, it must be the game of the week because, phenomenal.
Yeah. And you said you're taking the Colts as well?
Yeah, I'll take the Colts.
Just want to make sure. All right, so that's the Colts and Titans, and our guest picker is on their first island, if I'm remembering correctly. So good for them. We can finally beat them now. All right, so
that one's gonna blow up in our face.
Yeah, watch it blow up, and we go 0 for 16 this week. All right, so I want to move now to a game of a little less importance in between the NFC and AFC, and that's the 3-7 New York Giants, who have won 2 in a row and are coming off their bye week, going to Cincinnati to take on the 2-7-1 Bengals, who have lost 2 in a row. And Mark, things have quickly gone from bad to worse for the Bengals. I mean, it was bad enough that, they were one of the worst teams in the league in terms of record. Then Joe Burrow tears his ACL and MCL. He's done for the year. And that really sent kind of shockwaves throughout the league. And everybody was, very upset about it. I saw Bengals fans donated like $30,000 to Joe Burrow's charity in Cincinnati. And that was very touching on them. So that was the big blow on Sunday. But then on Tuesday, the hits just kept on coming for the Bengals because Sports Illustrated dropped an article detailing some alleged toxic workplace environments within the Bengals locker room. Now, let me look at my notes here just to make sure I get this specifically right. According to the article, there is a lack of communication and trust within the team between players and the coaching staff. That is not just between players and assistant coaches. They're alleging that goes along with head coach Zach Taylor. And this reaches all the way back to when they benched Andy Dalton right before the trade deadline. There's still some hurt feelings within the organization about that, and players that supported Andy Dalton, they're still upset about that. This goes into the Carlos Dunlap thing where he was, venting his frustrations to the media. That's apparently about, he felt there was a lack of communication between him and the coaching staff, so he felt his only route was to go into the media and talk. They named specifically the defensive coordinator and offensive line coaches as being verbally abusive towards players within the locker room, and players are apparently laying low and not speaking out of fear of losing playing time, like what happened with Carlos Dunlap. So the entire franchise right now has just been taking a gigantic punch in the face this entire week, first losing Burrow, and now this article dropping from Sports Illustrated. So it's a very, very rough time for the Bengals right now. And now they have to host a Giants team, switching to the game now, that's really starting to come into their own and is actually looking like a legitimate team despite their record. If any of you follow me on Twitter, you know that I like this Giants team a lot. There was this story by NFL Network in the offseason about Joe Judge, the current head coach for the Giants, and they talked about the players are in love with this guy in his first year, that they would literally run through a wall for him. And I rolled my eyes at the time. I was like, okay, let's see what happens when they actually take the field and play. And they're playing like it, Mark. There's only been one game this season where the Giants weren't in it. Every other game, besides the one loss to San Francisco where they got blown out, has been decided by 10 points or less. They're in every single game against opponents that are obviously superior to them. They're playing good football on defense. The only problem has been their offense. And, you know, Daniel Jones is doing a bit better at not turning the ball over. He's still fumbling, and that should be noted. He is still not turning the ball over, and their offense is starting to get its legs underneath it. I really like this Giants team. It may not be their year in the East right now, but I can seriously see a scenario within the next 2 or 3 years where they're a legitimate winning team and making deep postseason runs. I feel like they're set up that well in terms of a head coach and defense. I really like this Giants team. They're really cooking on all cylinders right now. And with a Bengals team that's very low, they just lost their starting quarterback. Brandon Allen is actually going to start for the Bengals this weekend and not Ryan Finley. If that name sounds familiar, Brandon Allen actually started a couple games for the Broncos last season. He made some solid plays and wasn't super terrible. So some people are saying it's a good move, and other people are worried that's going to jeopardize their draft pick. So take that for what it's worth. I'm taking the Giants to win because I like them so much and I love their defense. And the Bengals are just having a week from hell, basically, is what the Bengals are having right now.
Yeah, I suppose which do I want to take first, the positive or the negative? Positively, I was all about New York at the beginning of the year, and I honestly feel that I lost a couple of games early on the picks because I had faith in them to be a decent team, and I'm glad that they're finally being able to show it. I didn't have that number. I mean, they have been keeping games close. I wouldn't obviously put the blame down to Saquon Barkley. Right. Like, you might see people, you know, like I did think that they had fundamental issues anyway, but they were a decent team, and should have been Daniel Jones stepping up a bit more. So look, they're coming around now. On Cincinnati, I was disappointed when I saw those reports or whatever. Like, you're kind of sympathetic towards Zach Taylor and what he had inherited, but that issue of no one ever wanted to take the job, I don't know, maybe behind the scenes, and I'm just making this up as my own thinkings on it, was he struggled to get that defensive coordinator, and maybe it was because he was known as being ruthless or whatever. But sure, look what was happening with Rex Ryan for the longest time. He was a pretty fashionable coach as well, and he was, you know, it eventually caught up with him. Or Greg Roman seems to be the same kind of guy. So, I mean, not that this happens and it's acceptable, but I have no idea how an organization is run. I've never been in an NFL locker room. I can't speak to that. And I don't know if it's people voicing it now because the team is bad and they can have a chance to do it. But yeah, I'm going with that Giants game as well. I was actually going to use this Bengals game as a platform to go to Justin Herbert because of the similarities with Joe Burrow. But yeah, I don't want to tie his name to what's going on in Cincinnati this week. So if you've given your pick, which is the Giants, I believe, yes, I'll take it to the other side of New York. I mean, the other side of the stadium, not upper New York. With another team, another New York team who has been, I don't know, recently more competitive too in the Jets. I mean, they lost that last second field goal attempt on Monday Night Football against New England a couple of weeks ago, and they just ran out of time to beat the Chargers last week with Justin Herbert. He had the ball with 4 seconds left and he took a safety or whatever. It's just not that they just ran out of time. They did their bit, but they ran out of time really. But the problem really for New York is going to be self-inflicted one way or another. Sam Darnold is now day to day, and he's adamant to get back on the field because he probably knows himself that he's playing for his job, his place in New York. Because if they have the first overall pick, they're going to have to go with Trevor Lawrence. So many angles of breaking this down. Joe Flacco has rapport with Denzel Mims. So if he's going to be part of your future, you want to get confident, you want to be able to assess him. but you also want to be able to assess Sam Darnold with proper wide receivers now that they have James Crowder, Rashad Perryman, and Mims all hopefully going to be on the field together for the first time.
Right, correct.
So the problem then becomes, if Sam Darnold comes on and is good, do you play yourself out of picking Trevor Lawrence, which shouldn't be the case? Or do you play yourself out of Adam Gase being fired, which shouldn't be the case? I think they should be done deals regardless with the Jets, that you're going to have to go for Trevor Lawrence. There's no such thing as a guarantee, but like you've seen what you have with Sam Darnold, and the energy that a change in quarterback and head coach, just getting rid of the whole culture that there is there at the moment. Like, even I go to Joe Douglas, who, you know, these aren't his picks, and like we haven't, or I don't feel like the Joe Douglas era is in full swing yet for the Jets, him being the general manager. That, yeah, what's more important? Getting your win, and don't get me wrong, no one ever forgets about the 0-16 teams, like the Browns in 2017, whereas you'd forget that the Browns in 2017 the Browns in 2016 were a 1-15 team, you know. So if they just get one win, yeah, that's great, and I hope they get it. But what's more important is the future of the franchise. So yeah, they want to be able to evaluate and forget about the momentum that you're pushing forward with Joe Flacco, your quarterback. So if Sam Darnold does come in, I think they're, you know, playing their way to the 0-16 really.
Yeah, and you know, that's the worry, especially with a Jacksonville team, because that's the one team that's nipping at their heels, is that if the Jets win, then maybe Jacksonville could get the first overall pick, and they need a quarterback as well. So that's the one fear in Jets mindsets. But this could potentially happen. Division rivalries, and they're playing Miami this week. They do weird things. They always do weird things, especially with a Miami Dolphins team that's got some questions at quarterback right now, because, you know, Tua didn't play well, then he got benched, and then it's like, are they protecting him because he's hurt, or are they protecting him because he got sacked 6 times? A lot of questions around Miami right now. But Mark, I'm going to do something insanely stupid right now. It's insanely stupid. I'm picking the Jets to win. It's insane.
Oh God.
Yeah. Listen, I have a reason though. I have a reason. You ready for this? Because I feel they're getting closer and closer and closer every single week to a win. I'm going to get it right eventually. So I'm just going to keep doing it until they get the win. That's my game plan over these final couple weeks of the season. Just keep picking the Jets.
I think you've read my script from the Atlanta Falcons for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the year, when I kept on having the same attitude that they'd have to win eventually.
They have to.
There's 2 points, 2 bigger points where I think you could be right on this. Mm-hmm. Adam Gase, obviously, his past with the Dolphins, all bets are off in those kind of scenarios. It seems like former head coaches can pull wins over their whole team. And the other thing is, the bookies are making this a tighter game. Last week, I don't know, did I mention it, but the longest spread was the Chargers to beat 10 points, or to beat the Jets by 10 points. It was the biggest points difference the bookies were offering last week. They're only giving 6.5 points for this game, which I think tells you a lot about the Tua versus Herbert for the MVP race. Now, I'm glad that Brian Flores was able to come back. I don't know, maybe he listens to our show, and
he does. He's got it on in the locker room.
Realize where Tua's at.
Yeah,
because we went into it last week when Ryan Fitzpatrick came on. In the final quarter, he had more completions and more yards in that one quarter than Tua had for his 3 quarters the other day. So it was absolutely the right decision, and he put them in a position to win. So I think Brian Flores now he shows that what we're thinking as fans, y'all are able. Well, we are able to look and evaluate someone like that because we're apparently wizards, but. He was being realistic, and it's not like Tua can't bounce back next week. He just understands, as the head coach, where his quarterback is at. And I just thought that was a very good sign. And I said to my younger brother, if they had won that game the other day with Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think that solidifies Brian Flores as head coach of the year, because it was that bold of a move.
It was extremely bold. There were so many people screaming, "Oh, you can't do that. It's going to shatter his confidence." It's like, well, he's getting sacked like 8 times and his ankle isn't looking right. And he's not, like, what can he learn in this final quarter against a defense that shut him out all day? That was, I'll defend Brian Flores on that hill with you. That was a brilliant call on his part to at least try something. I liked it a lot.
And he didn't baby the quarterback, which is something that you quite often hear. We just mentioned about Doug Peterson, whether he'll baby Carson Wentz for a week or will he put Hurts in. I just thought that was really cool to see that, you know, you kind of just, he didn't care. He just said, yeah, I'm putting Ryan Fitzpatrick in. He didn't have to explain that to anyone. We don't know, was it for an injury or just because? I think it was just because he wasn't playing well that he, like, sometimes it's not that difficult. Like when DeAndre Hopkins caught the Hail Mary ball against the Bills a couple of weeks ago, someone asked him, like, how'd you get that play? And he goes, 2 + 2 = 4. Throw the ball up and I come down with it. It's the same thing here when you're thinking about taking out your quarterback and going back to Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was the hot hand for a load of weeks, and you won't put into it because everyone was crying to see the rookie.
Right.
I thought it was a very brave move by Brian Flores, and yeah, I think that he's a good enough coach that he should be able to see past the Jets this weekend. So I'm actually going with Miami, and I really hope now that the Jets don't end that streak, even though I can see that, again, they have to, you'd imagine, get a win somewhere, and doing it against a division opponent is often a likely scenario.
It's a coming. It's a coming, people. I'm telling you, it's a coming. I'm gonna get right one of these weeks. Yeah, I'm gonna be like a crazy person in the final week of the season, just shaking, and like the picks are on the line, and I'm like, give me the Jets one more time. So hopefully they make me right at some point, and that's all I'm hoping for. All right, so that's the Miami and Jets game. And Mark, I want to go to Sunday Night Football next for this one, because the 5-5 Chicago Bears, who have lost 4 in a row, are going to Green Bay to take on the 7-3 Packers, who are coming off a drumming of a loss to the aforementioned Colts. And here I have another prop this week. I'm gonna give you the entire Bear season in one thing. All right, you see this bear right here? All right, so here's the bear. It's going up and up and up like that yodeler on a Wheel of Fortune. Here they are, 5-1. You ready? They're 5-1. They're peaking, and then they just fall off the face of the earth because they've lost 4 in a row. And that's the Bears season in a nutshell. So the last time we saw the Bears, it was a Monday night game against the Vikings. They got horribly messed up by the Vikings, and then they had their bye week. So here's a quick refresher for you. Trubisky's hurt. He's got a messed up shoulder. He can't play. Foles messed up his hip at the end of that game, and they're saying he probably can't play. So who exactly does that leave at quarterback? It sounds like, if I'm pronouncing this name right, Tyler Bray will be the quarterback for the Bears this weekend. It hasn't been confirmed yet, so we're just going to assume he plays. He came in for relief at the end of the game against the Vikings. And if you don't know Tyler Bray, he played his college ball at Tennessee. He was on the same team as Cordell Patterson, his current teammate. So there's a little refresher for him. He came out in the 2013 draft. He was undrafted. He went to the Chiefs organization for 5 years. He followed Matt Nagy when he came to Chicago in 2018, and he's been a part of the team ever since as like a practice squad guy or just an intermediate roster guy. Tyler Bray completed a couple passes in the game against Minnesota, but he's never started a game. So this will be his first start on Sunday Night Football against a Packers team that's looking out to kind of avenge themselves, because they are not happy with how that game went. They turned the ball over 4 times, and they just did not look good at all in that second half against the Colts. Like Mark talked about earlier, how impressed we were with the Colts. We were very much questioning what the Packers were doing in that second half. They did not look right in any kind of sense, and this should be a get-right game for them. At least the Packers defense, at least. The Bears offense has done nothing, and I mean nothing, the last better part of month and a half of the season. They've been amongst one of the worst in the league in every single category, and if it is true that they're going to start Tyler Bray, an undrafted guy making his first career start, it should be a field day for that Packers defense. And if you're expecting them to come out and have another bad day on offense, this Bears defense is good, and I think they're one of the better ones in the league. I don't think the Packers are going to turn the ball over 4 times, and that's kind of what the Bears need in order to win this game. It's not going to happen, and I think the Packers are going to come out there and really hang a rough one on the Bears in Sunday Night Football, unless this game gets flexed out, and I hope it does, because we as a nation shouldn't have to sit through more Bears football in prime time. I'm taking the Packers.
Yeah, it's kind of an easy decision when you're getting into backup quarterbacks, but this is just speaking of which the biggest game by the bookies was last week. Well, this is the biggest point spread this week, 8.5 points to, like, that's not even a big spread. I guess they just learned from last week's slate of games because they're all 1-point scores, which broke our hearts in terms of our picks. I mean, we had said it on the show how close a lot of those games were, but for them all to seemingly fall against us was kind of devastating. I was just like, come on. I picked one of the upsets of the week was Carolina with PJ Walker to beat Detroit, and they went out and done it by 20 points. I feel like I had all the non-one score games, and then the other ones just went the other way against me. I felt like, Jesus, like, what have I got to do over here? But yeah, I think Green Bay is one of my favorite teams to watch. I'm totally in on them, except for Marquez Fantas gambling, which I suppose I can open up our private conversation where I messaged Hayden being like, you know what, glad I mentioned on the show last week that Rodgers had thought that he was turning a corner. He absolutely has, looking to making plays here, and then he goes and drops the ball. in overtime to give the Colts the win.
Yeah, that was Mark was not happy in our group chat over that.
I
He
was
was like,
shocked.
no. Yeah,
I
he
was
was. He was
shocked. And I still, now that I've calmed down, maintain like that is a good punch. And I don't know, do you ever trust that player? Because like he's had so many opportunities now, and he just, anytime he's on an upswing, he comes back down just as fast again. And it's very hard to get a read on that player. Maybe he just needs a new situation, but I don't know how it gets any better than a quarterback that constantly is backing him in Aaron Rodgers. So yeah, I'm going for Green Bay in that game.
Yeah.
But I hope no crazy trickery by the Bears this week. That's I'm kind of starting to pull the plug on them a little bit for the playoffs. It's taken us a while, and certainly longer than me, who predicted that they could have the top 5 pick in the draft at the beginning of the year. But yeah, I just think Green Bay should surely come back into it, because it's like they did play a good half of football. They just fell asleep after taking a 14-point halftime lead.
Yeah. So that's the Sunday night football game as of now. I think it's a prime candidate to get flexed, and hopefully it should, because once again, we as a nation have suffered enough. Give us good football on Sunday night. Give us any one of the other remaining games, and I promise it will be more entertaining than that Chicago Green Bay one. So that's Sunday night football as of now. And Mark, where would you like to go next?
Yeah, I suppose I mentioned it a second ago. The LA Chargers was who I was originally going to go with. And to mention the guy who's going to take over as the, elected or whatever, president-elect, rookie of the year elect, Joe Herbert.
That was good. That was good.
Who, last week and for a few weeks, it was being brought up the whole time. Oh, how good is Joe Burrow? He is going to set all kinds of rookie records. Where now in front of him, Herbert has who didn't start in week 1, by the way, except for the whole Tyrod Taylor thing, is on pace to beat Baker Mayfield's touchdown records. He's on pace to beat Carson Wentz's completions record as rookie, and Andrew Luck's yards, total yards on the season record. To do it in game less is impressive. To take it out of the clutches of Joe Burrow is impressive. To be doing it at the rate that he's supposed to do. He's supposed to beat the touchdowns by 10. Like Baker Mayfield had 26 or 27, and he's on pace to get 37. I suppose he's already gotten a record for most games with 3 touchdowns in it. So Justin Herbert, I'm glad that we were positive about him from the off, unlike his head coach, because it's so impressive now what he's doing. Austin Eckler should be back as well, I should mention. But you'd imagine the only way that Justin Herbert doesn't break those records if he breaks a body part. So he's going to break something one way or another. It's a shame.
Don't
I know.
it.
John, I feel like I'm trying to undo the jinx here, because I'm guaranteeing that he's going to break something. So at least I better acknowledge that he's going to break something, and hopefully it won't be a leg. But then going from a positive team like that to Buffalo, who not has doubts around them, don't get me wrong, but like, when you're looking at this team, a couple of things jump out to me. I kind of wonder about their running game, because last year, it was 8th in the league for rushes per game, and now it's jumped down to 27th. And no other team really has seen that big of a drop off. Yeah, Indianapolis has gone from one of the top teams to the middle of the pack, but they had their summer starter, Marlon Mack, got injured very quickly. And it's only the middle of the pack they've dropped to, whereas Buffalo has dropped all the way back to 27th in the league. Devin Singletary is on pace just to get even less than last year. I suppose he had a breakout year in his rookie year, so it was expected to go up. But now he's losing the carries to Zach Moss. So why is that important? Well, it's going to start snowing soon in Buffalo. It's not for this weekend. Knock on wood. I'll take a screenshot off the Weather Channel for that one. So it's not supposed to start snowing now, but as the weather turns a bit, they're going to have to rely on the running game. And that's in comparison to the passing game, which has taken all the focus this year. Everyone's, it's such a good attack, but I just feel like they're an elite cornerback away from devastation, because Stephon Diggs absolutely runs that offense, or it goes through him. He's 300 yards more than the next closest receiver in Cole Beasley. And then I think Cole Beasley is 300 over John Brown, who's obviously missed games with injury. But John Brown always misses games with injury. You can't put that down as like an external force. It's just such an apparent with John Brown, unfortunately. I know from the games that he was playing with the Cardinals a few years ago. So I just feel like in a couple of games time, Buffalo is going to meet San Francisco and Pittsburgh over the next 2 weeks. Actually, they're back to back, and they're two top 5 teams against the pass. And yeah, you'd have to kind of sit forward, and I think they'll be able to get through Los Angeles. But it's definitely something I'm flagging now, because you just have to be worried about them a bit. I just want to give a hat tip to Nick Wodgton from USA Today. Sorry if I butchered your name, who was one of these guys that talked about Josh Allen, and he didn't use numbers right at all. He's one of these people that said, oh, Josh Allen is heading into the bye with the most passing yards in the league. But I'm like, no, because he's had one extra game than 90% of quarterbacks there is. That people need to come off that kind of stats. Per game, I think they're like 7th or 8th. So they are great at passing, but it's all going through Stephon Diggs. There's a huge discrepancy between him and the next wide receiver behind him, Cole Beasley. I'm going to get into that a bit more later with one of the other games. But I just think there's a lot to that offense. But one go cornerback matched up over Stephon Diggs could make it come crashing down.
Yeah, and that's something I really want to point out. You talked about how it's going to start snowing in Buffalo in a couple of weeks, and you're right. And that's something that the Bills should absolutely play into. They're on track to win their division and, host a playoff game. So some poor team is going to have to come into Buffalo and play in these elements. Buffalo needs to, get kind of, strong-willed with it and use that to their advantage, like what Mark's saying. But I worry a bit because, the last time we saw the Bills, they were getting walked off by Kyler Murray in a play that Mark will forever replay in his head as one of the greatest ever. And then they go into their bye week. So I wonder about the mental state of these Bills because, they played a solid final drive in that game to win. Not enough people talk about that Stephon Diggs touchdown to take the lead late, and it just gets washed away by DeAndre Hopkins having one of the greatest plays in NFL history. So I wonder a bit about their mental state. This game's going to come down to the wire like all Chargers games kind of do. I'm taking the Buffalo Bills to win this one, though. Get back in the win column.
Yeah, I think they win. I should point out, just while I replay that image in my head of the DeAndre Hopkins touchdown, they were missing cornerbacks that game. So I think they're down to their 3rd and 4th stringers. So we'll give them some kind of credit for that. But yeah, going forward, I'm paying attention. I'm just going to be paying attention to. And look, once upon a time, a few months ago, we were rating how it should have been a good Chargers secondary. Look, they're not going up against that this week. The week enough, I suppose, the Chargers there in the secondary now at this point. But yeah, like on defense, the Bills aren't matching up. They were a phenomenal defense last year. I mean, Austin Eckler, when they could be back, I had the number here in front of me. It's after disappearing again, but the Chargers themselves aren't fantastic against the run. So not that it looks like Austin Eckler won't play. It's not that big of an issue anyway. Oh, sorry, Bills 5th last. There we go, against the run. So if we're going to see a different kind of game that it's not on Herbert's back, maybe it does happen this week.
That'd be nice. Yeah. Oh no, go ahead.
I just think there's some for a team that people are so high on. And I hate to go so anti-Bills again because I thought I'd gotten off that train. But I just think they're relying on Stephon Diggs too much. And sure, look, that came back to bite me last year because I thought, how can you go into the season with Cole Beasley and John Brown as your number 1 and 2 guy? So they did go out and upgrade. And if, say, a cornerback does match up over Stephon Diggs, maybe they've turned to the run game. They get that going again. But just for me right now, it's a question mark for me. And I'm looking forward to seeing. Not this week. I'm probably going to rehash these points next week when we're previewing the game and I actually get to look forward to the San Francisco game.
Yeah.
But,
so you said you're taking the Bills as well, right?
Yeah, play it safe and go for the Bills.
That's smart. It'll be a fun one, though. Chargers games are always fun. So that's the Charger and Buffalo game. And, Mark, I want to go to a game next that we kind of slightly previewed because, well, we just talked about one of their teams a fair amount. And that's the 6-4 Arizona Cardinals, Mark's favorite bird team, going to New England to take on the 4-6 Pats. Now, the last time we saw the Cardinals, they were getting defensively hung over by the Seattle Seahawks. And Kyler Murray was a bit messed up in that game. He hurt his shoulder in that one. And that's been a concern and a talking point all week. At Tuesday's practice, he was working off to the side for the Cardinals, but he's been saying the same thing that he's been saying since that Thursday night game against the Seahawks, is that he's fine and he's good to go. So if we're going to take him for what he's saying, I truly believe without question he's going to play in this game Sunday. The only question is, how healthy is he going to be? I would ballpark it at around 85 to 90%. He'll be mostly healthy for this one, maybe some slight shoulder issues, but we will know that more at game time. But he should be good to go for the Cardinals. And for this Pats defense, the last time we saw them, they were playing the Texans. And you and I talked about it on that show that, like, if Watson's going to go off in a game, it would be in that game and put on a show against that Pats defense. And he had them just all kinds of messed up in that game, Mark. 3 total touchdowns, one of the best games of his young season so far for Watson. And I feel like Murray can kind of present that same kind of problem for the Pats defense, in that a very mobile quarterback. And when he's at his most electric, he's running with the football. And that's a nightmare scenario for this Pats defense, who has not played good for the vast majority of this season. If I remember correctly, as of this morning, they're dead last in defensive DVOA, which is not a good stat to be at the bottom of. And if they're supposed to contain this, or at least do something to help mitigate this Kyler Murray offensive assault, I think it has to come down to Cam Newton having a good day passing. And that, yeah, he passed for over 300 yards against the Texans, and he only passed for 1 touchdown, but he still rushed for a touchdown or 2. I think Cam has to have a good day in order to keep pace with this Cardinals defense, because to be honest with you, Mark, I just don't trust the Pats defense right now. And that feels blasphemous based on what they've done for us the past 20 years. And Bill Belichick, I just don't trust him to slow down Kyler Murray right now. I just don't. Even a Kyler Murray that's not 100%, I still don't trust him. And I think Kyler Murray has one of the best days of his season so far, even if the weather's a little choppy in New England. I'm taking the Cardinals to win. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a blowout, in all honesty.
I would love it to be a blowout, of course.
Just look at that jersey in the background. Yeah.
Right. As I think about my MVP for Kyler Murray, even though he's gone off the ball because of the last day. I don't think that the injury should sideline him the way that they're talking about it this week. I would actually be surprised. I never suppose it was in that call me an optimist if you want. But yeah, I just saw him playing the whole time. The one thing I'd worry about is Cam Newton had such fun with the Cardinals when he was in his Carolina days that it's always a worry going up against him. Once upon a time, namely last season, I was looking forward to going to this game. I knew that it was coming down the line, and I wanted to see Tom Brady and Bill Belichick before they retired. And because it was in Boston, it'd be one of the easier games for me to go to. Cheap, it'd be a bit cheaper and stuff. So it's funny how it's one of those games in February that you put down as a loss, and what has happened to New England in the meantime is remarkable, that they've just become so uncompetitive, and like they didn't look close to Houston the other day, who we've liked them, and we said all along that it was just going to happen too late for them to get some wins. I saw some guy under some power rankings the other day comment that they should be number 15 in power rankings after this weekend. I know we're talking about the Cardinals now here and New England, but yeah, that New England just toyed with them, I thought. Sorry, Houston toyed with New England, really, even though it was a close game. But yeah, I'm picking the Cardinals in this game too. If they lose it, playoffs are on the line. Like, these are the games that you have to get wins in.
Yeah, and that's fair. So that I just wanted to get through that game super quick, and that's the Cardinals and New England game. We're both on the board for the Cardinals, and New England's got to do something to keep their slim playoff hopes alive. But this should be a game where the Cardinals roll. I just don't see how New England slows down Kyler Murray at this point. I really don't.
We haven't mentioned our guest pickers in a while. Next Man Up podcast, they're going with Cardinals as well. And of course, if we haven't mentioned any of our picks or their picks, they're going to be on the Twitter, so keep an eye out for that, of course. As we move forward to another game, a playoff eliminator, I just said, for the Cardinals if they lose to New England. Well, what about Carolina and Minnesota?
Ooh,
this is 2 teams with 4 wins each. Now, the Panthers still have to go on a bye, but 2 4-win teams that have very little room to maneuver. I mean, if they run the table the rest of the way, Carolina, they'll only end up with 9 wins. So I don't know even if it is an eliminator for them.
I'm trying to do the math in my head. I think they'll be fine. I think they could maybe slip in there if a bunch of teams start losing games, but maybe.
No, it's possible. It's possible,
yeah,
but I just think that, I mean, at a stretch, this could be a playoff, a tiebreaker. But what's huge gone into this game? Adam Thielen is on COVID. I mean, we'll mention this a bunch. There's another team that's going to be coming up, the COVID players. Adam Thielen could be out. We don't know. He had one test come back as positive, one test come back as negative. So is it a false false positive. We're not too sure. But he's coming off a game against Dallas with 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, ouch, like you want him. And I suppose the reason I say this so soon after saying about Stephon Diggs is Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson are now like this big duo as far as they go in the NFL. I'm going to mention some more on this in 30 seconds time. Call it 2 minutes. But if Adam Thielen goes, that puts huge, suppose, pressure on Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, because Adam Thielen has as many yards as the next 3 guys behind him combined. That's Kyle Rudolph, Dalvin Cook, and Irv Smith in the passing game. I mean, when you hear Dalvin Cook, it's not all rushing. So it would put a burden on them. And to make that make sense, Adam Thielen specifically has 34% of the team's yards, 28% of the targets, and 27% of the team's completions. So he absolutely, and that's after a slow start, don't forget, by Kirk Cousins and this offense. So now that they're starting to click, you need Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen to make this whole thing work, even though, like I've said before, that Irv Smith is really coming on at the tight end position. He's probably just factoring Kyle Rudolph out a bit. So they go up against this feisty Carolina team. And I mentioned that we have a really good wide receiver duo in Thielen and Justin Jefferson, because a guy that goes under the radar, Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, are pretty good themselves as it stands. And I'm going to do the numbers right versus my Bills fan a minute ago. Right now, they stand at the number 5 and number 10 yards yards on the season, Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. But if you actually boil that down to yards per game, the company that they keep, so Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones have the most yards per game. I know Julio Jones missed some time, so that's going to factor in his missed games. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill are there next. Tyler Metcalf and Lockett, or DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore are 2 good players that are there as well. And they're going to match up kind of similar to what Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson does to you. So then I look at the defensive numbers, and Carolina, per ESPN, if you want to go into these stats a bit more, like beats Minnesota in total yards, pass yards, rush yards, and points per game. So like they actually stack up with each other as far as teams go pretty well. And you know, it just, as far as the records go, those 2 wide receivers go, the defensive numbers go, they're actually very close. And I think it's an appropriate game then to think of it as a tie game, a playoff eliminator. So before I started doing this preview, I presumed Minnesota was going to win. And I texted you the other day when we received our picks off the guys, and I said, oh, that's where they could potentially be on an island, the Next Man Up podcast, that is, because I'm going to go for Minnesota. But after breaking down the numbers, I hate that we don't get the injury report when we're doing this. I mean, the Saturday injury report, because we don't know if Adam Thielen's in. But suddenly with Teddy Bridgewater coming back, Christian McCaffrey is unlikely to play, even though he's training.
Yeah.
I'm suddenly leaning towards Carolina.
Oh, you're going to ride that train again, 2nd week in a row.
It's surprising because they were a team that I wasn't in on. But like when you boil down their numbers, like they do have a good wide receiver duo, and the defense is doing well, versus Minnesota is hot and cold. I mean, they're hotter more often than they're cold at the moment, but we just saw what Dallas was able to do to them. So I understand now where the guys from the podcast were coming from, Mike, Lehman, Phil. And I'm going with Carolina as well.
Wow. That's fair. And you know what? I get that. And, you know, as you mentioned that Dallas game, I literally have it on the NFL Network right now, and they're in the 4th quarter, and I'm watching Dallas drive down the field. And as I watched that game, Mark, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this was supposed to be the easy part of the Viking schedule where they start stacking wins and get back in the postseason hunt. And that loss was absolutely brutal. I think it changed the trajectory of where they could go immensely. I mean, they seriously have to look at winning out in order to even have a shot. And that's against teams like, if I remember correctly, New Orleans is on that schedule. And I think it's Tampa Bay as well as on that schedule. So they're going to have
Green Bay. You can be, Green Bay, they played the 2 against, but it's the Bears that they have to play again, I think, which I just said that I don't rate.
So think about that. Like, they have to basically be perfect against teams that are probably going to hang losses on them already. So losing to Dallas was absolutely inexcusable, and they can't afford to lose to this very game Panthers team. Like you said, this Panthers team is no slouch, no matter who's playing at quarterback. PJ Walker showed he can sling it, and we all know Teddy B's been having a pretty solid season there. I'm riding with the Vikings only because this is an absolute must win for them, and I expect them to come out and play like it. And that's why I'm riding them to win. But Panthers could easily win this game, in my opinion. Like Mark said, they could easily win it.
Minnesota are favorites going into this game, so you're not being bold at all by going with them, and it is the natural pick. I would have thought to read out some numbers. What I'm talking about, I promised myself I wouldn't bore people by reading out these numbers.
I like numbers.
In terms of, so I won't give them all. I'll just give you an idea. Carolina is in the late teens in terms of defensive numbers on total yards, pass yards, run yards, points per game, whereas Minnesota is mid to late 20s. The big discrepancy is on points. Carolina's 15th in points per game. Minnesota 27th defensive points per game. That is points allowed, I should say. So that to me was the number I circled. And I said, with Teddy Bridgewater coming back in, I mean, he maybe plays like he did against Atlanta, and it just wasn't a good game. But this is a bigger matchup than people would probably be letting on, especially as we are right at that bubble, right at that cutoff point to make the playoffs, as these two teams are kind of that bar right now. If anyone's going to make a push, it's going to be between the two of these. So super interesting game. And yeah, suddenly I'm pulling for Carolina in that. And what I just said there would be an obvious Minnesota win.
You've come full circle on the Panthers, Mark. Congratulations. You did it.
Yeah,
you did it.
But an absolute fluke it was. It was a comment that was made on the broadcast the other day about how Robbie Anderson was having a good year and that he was 15 yards. I think they actually got that back to front, that it should have been DJ Moore was the one that was fifth per yards per game, that is. But yeah, I said, I promised myself, I said I better look into that, and I did, and I was surprised, and I've surprised myself now going off and picking them.
I like it. I'm expecting to see some Carolina blue in that room when we talk next week. Anyway.
Never. Not after what they've done with the Cardinals over the last few years. Forget about it.
Oh, man. Oh, that's a joy. All right. So that's the Carolina-Minnesota game. Big game in terms of playoff aspirations for 2 4-win teams. Can't believe I'm saying that, but it's very true, people. And that's for that game. And now I want to go to a different game in the AFC West, because the 8-2 New Orleans Saints, who have won 7 in a row, people, the second longest win streak in the league right now, are going to Denver to take on the 4-6 Broncos. And I'm going to hit this game very quickly because in my opinion, this is going to be a very defensive heavy showdown in Denver. The Saints team, in my opinion, is really rounding into shape everybody. Their defense played lights out against Atlanta. They sacked Matt Ryan 8 times. They only allowed 9 points. That's just the 3 field goals. There were no touchdowns in that game. They wouldn't let the Falcons out of the starting gate. They're starting to resemble what the Saints were last year when Drew Brees went out and Teddy Bridgewater came in, is that playing good defense and the offense just does enough. And that's what they did in that game against the Falcons. Taysom Hill came out of the gate and he was a little shaky. You know, he was still finding his rhythm. And then once he got settled in, you could tell he was starting to feel it. That's something I really want to watch the Saints going forward, is that the extra mobility at quarterback is something that I think can unlock their offense going forward. I mean, we all know who Drew Brees is at 40 years old. He's a statue back there in the backfield. I don't know why I was struggling to say that word, but having Taysom Hill in there and him rushing for 2 touchdowns and having extra mobility to extend and make plays, I feel like that can open up a plethora of opportunities for the Saints going forward, especially against a pretty good looking defense for Denver that really shut down a very hot Miami team. They didn't let not Taysom Hill to do anything in that game at all. He had like 80 yards by the time he got benched for Ryan Fitzpatrick at the start of the 4th quarter. And I think that's what this is going to be, a good Saints defense that's rounding into shape against a good Broncos defense in the late afternoon. And it should be probably a game I would be stunned if either team scores more than 20 points, to be brutally honest with you, Mark. And Drew Lock, the Broncos quarterback, he's had a very rough stretch as of late. He's thrown a combined 11 interceptions in his last 6 games. And it's at the point now where Broncos fans on social media are openly saying that they don't believe in him anymore, and they think the team needs to look elsewhere for their quarterback. So the fans have done a complete 180 on poor Drew Lock. And it's at the point where, in my opinion, he's played just so poorly so far this season that it's kind of an audition the rest of the way, is that he needs to show that there's something there in order for them to be confident that he's their franchise quarterback like they were going into the season. I mean, you and I were both very high up on Drew Lock at the start of the season, and rightfully so after what he showed us at the end of last season, but he has not played well at all these last couple games. And he's got to really show us something these last couple of weeks in order to keep that kind of status as a franchise quarterback. I'm going to take the Saints because they're the hot hand right now, and I feel like Sean Payton will cook up enough to get them enough points to win a defensive-heavy slugfest. But if Drew Lock comes out and throws 2 more or 3 more interceptions like he's done the last couple of weeks, it's going to get extra rough for that poor young guy in Denver. It really will be, but I'm taking the Saints to win.
One of the reasons we were so positive on Denver going into the year was not only Drew Lock, but the surrounding talent.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they need to get something out of it, especially with Jerry Jeudy and stuff. I know he's not the best rookie of the year in terms of wide receivers, but he's still pretty good, you know. So,
right.
Fans are probably right to be getting a bit impatient with Drew Lock. I'm not saying that because I went off him over the last couple of weeks. I'm saying that honestly, that he, is under pressure, and it's crazy how fast that 180 came. Don't get me wrong. Like, my God, like they were so in on him. They thought they got a steal in the second round last year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll wait and see. I know I'm going for the Saints again, or as well, I should say, in that one. No surprise, really. I think they should be able to come through. But leading us on to our next game, a team that we were super high on was Denver. Well, a team that I didn't know where I stood for a long time was LA.
Ooh.
And I was talking to James Hill from last week, who did our picks from across the pond. And yeah, we were kind of talking. And I say, oh, some people are writing off this team and think that they'll fall down the stretch. Where I don't really get that. But the comment that really stood to me was I said to him, but against this Tampa Bay running defense, it could be an absolute nightmare. And not that came back to bite me, but wow, was it an explosion on offense. Jared Goff goes off and has 376 yards, throwing a a season high for him.
Mm-hmm.
And the LA Rams, after that Super Bowl 13-3 performance when they lost to the Patriots, they'd kind of lost all kind of respect, really. They came back and followed it up last year with a less than stellar kind of trip back, hoping to get back to the Super Bowl. And Sean McVay's name was not brought through the mud, but the aura and the appeal went. And then there was all these questions in the offseason. Can Sean McVay get them back to there? And people were doubting it, but they're saying, look, he does have a good mind. It's time for him to prove it. So he goes off, gets rid of Gurley. Bad move, some people said. He didn't really know who your starting quarterback or running back would be in week 1. Darrell Henderson has just helped them unlock that again. They shows that it is a scheme that works. It wasn't just Todd Gurley. It was Todd Gurley's fault that it wasn't working, but that the scheme worked to play off the run, play action, all you like. And then Sean McVay, being the genius he was able to go and beat Bruce Arians' team the other day. And another part of that was like, we didn't really give credit to the team of the week, the wide receivers. I suppose like Brandon Cooks took away from Robert Woods being there, but Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, Cooper Kupp got his credit, but Robert Woods wouldn't. But he's coming off 2 straight 1,100 yard plus. I think he had 1,200 yards last year, and he's had at least 86 receptions the last couple of years. So like, he has been an elite wide receiver, but we just didn't give credit to the Rams as a whole for just a couple of years since they were so hot, and then they took a backseat. So it's interesting. And then what did they do? Like, the defensive coordinator, when they got rid of Wade Phillips, or soon to be podcast guest, I believe, Wade Phillips.
We're going to get him. He's my best friend.
We're still waiting on that one. I thought that was supposed to be 4 weeks ago. We teased that one. Your friend. So they bring in Brandon Staley, who but he wasn't a name that too many people knew about.
Mm-hmm.
But they're this year, the fewest yards allowed, the second in passing and 5th against the run, and the 3rd in sacks.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting to me is they only kept 3 starters from last year. Now, there is one more in there. Sebastian Joseph Day wasn't a starter in week 1 this year, but he's kind of gotten back in as a depth piece. But they changed around, and sure, look, when you have those guys, Michael Brockers and Aaron Donald, on your defensive line, of course, when they're going to be holdovers, they're going to be able to get sacks. The other guy that stayed around was John Johnson in the secondary, and the secondary is an important point, I think, because going into the 2019 season, you had Marcus Peters, Eric Weddle, Akeem Talib, Nicole Roby-Coleman, and of course, Johnson was your secondary, and that was supposed to be a lightning in a bottle kind of secondary that, like, you weren't beating that. And then it kind of never really worked out. They got rid of Marcus Peters. He went to the Ravens, and they ended up bringing Jalen Ramsey. So now it's Troy Hill, Taylor Rapp, and Jalen Ramsey. I was like, yeah, they're giving up no yards at all. It's an absolute nightmare to go against.
Mm-hmm.
That they're suddenly so exciting again, and I'm just super impressed by them. And for a team that I was in the division and expecting wins for the Cardinals, when now that the time is finally coming, the Rams are coming into form big time.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, they're frightening. I haven't even mentioned San Francisco because I'm so excited by the Rams now that performance the other day. I suppose that's why they say Monday night football, Sunday night football, Thursday night to a certain extent are where you really put on a show and you get your name out there. Well, yeah, I hadn't been paying enough attention to the Rams, and I saw them the other day. Super impressed by them, and scary going forward. I'm taking the Rams in that game.
Yeah, the last time we saw the Rams play the Niners, they got bullied by them on Sunday Night Football a couple weeks ago. I just don't see that happening again. That Monday night game against the Buccaneers was a true plant your flag moment for this Rams team. I was so annoyed these last couple weeks, like what Mark said, with people saying, oh, they'll fade from contention. These Rams ain't going nowhere, people. They're here to stay, and they're looking pretty damn good. I'm taking the Rams to win as well.
I said that I would keep that to a short preview, and I ran out of breath trying to keep it short, I believe. But yeah, I'm sorry that I didn't give enough credit to San Francisco, but I don't think we've given enough props to the LA Rams recently, and I hope I've made a bit of a making up for it there.
Yeah. And that's fair, and I get that. So that's the Rams and Niners game, and I'm gonna go through my next game super quick so we can get to the main event here, because the 6-4 Las Vegas Raiders are coming off a tough loss on Sunday Night Football, but they're going to Atlanta to take on a 3-7 Falcons team. And here's the thing, Vegas. I know you lost Sunday Night Football, but I'll tell you what you did win. You won my respect. That was a big moment for this Raiders team to go down there and take the lead versus the Chiefs. I knew they blew it in the last 2 minutes, but still, they showed that they could hang with them, and that's something we really questioned. So I'm very proud of what the Raiders did, and they have my respect going forward. Now, this Falcons team, on the other hand, they're coming off their worst loss since they were blowing double-digit leads in the early part of the season. Like I mentioned earlier with the Saints, they got nothing going on offense. They let Matt Ryan get sacked 8 times. But the good news is the Raiders have struggled on pass rush so far this season. They're second worst in the league in terms of generating sacks. They have 11 on the season. So hopefully it'll be a lot cleaner of a day for Matt Ryan going forward. I actually believe this game is going to be a shootout in Atlanta, because I still have questions about both of these defenses. Sure, the Falcons have played better, and so have the Raiders, but I'm not necessarily confident in saying that they're going to shut the other out, because we know what the Falcons can be on a good day, Mark. We've talked about that all season, and the Raiders have quietly been a very efficient top 10 offense. They're not flashy, but they'll get the job done, and that's all that really matters. So it's more of a question of who do you trust on offense right now, and as of right now, I feel like I trust the Raiders more because of what they've shown me, and I'm going to take them to win a high-scoring affair in Atlanta, in my opinion. I'm going to take the Raiders in this one.
One of the toughest games to call this week.
Yeah. I could have easily won Atlanta, by the way. I thought about it, but I stuck with the Raiders.
Yeah, I wrote down the Raiders just because I really, truly believe they're the gauge. And I've said that now, 3 episodes in a row, that they're the gauge in the AFC, that they just proved it against the Chiefs the other day, that I know it's the division game. We've gone on about that teams play differently, especially John Gruden, it seems, against Chiefs. But that was impressive. One way or another, that was impressive. I don't have to talk about Kansas City. I mentioned in my power rankings this week about how they turned it on when they needed to, and that's the scariest thing in the league right now. So you can forgive me for putting the Pittsburgh Steelers behind them in power rankings. But I'm going to have to say, yeah, they're on a bit of a roll, even though they're coming off that. That was a win-win, that loss the other day for the Raiders, because, yeah, they were able to put themselves on the map on Sunday Night Football. Really exciting game. Derek Carr is playing some of his best football at the moment, obviously, which helps massively. And yeah, I don't have numbers in front of me, Atlanta's run defense or whatever, but I hope that it's ready for Josh Jacobs, who seems to be like Aaron Jones in Green Bay, able to get a touchdown every game if he wants one. Yeah. That I'm going to keep riding the hot hand with Vegas at the moment, and yeah, it obviously kills me not to go with Atlanta. I always think they could win, but if this Raiders team can keep making these steps, yeah, very impressive, and good things for them coming in the future, then making playoffs and all that. And they need to keep in the hunt.
Yeah, they do, especially with a team like Kansas City kind of lurking up there. They gotta stack wins, and this is a perfect opportunity to stack wins. So that's the last of my games. And Mark, you're lucky. You get the main event again this week. Congratulations.
So this game comes at the end once more, and it feels like they always come once more to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it almost comes with the same message as 2 weeks ago to relax. I mean, yeah, they marginally lost to the Rams the other day, but there's a couple of ways of looking at this. Short term, people panicked after the New Orleans game.
Yep.
Then the Bucs went off and torched Carolina the next week. Yeah, look, they're not able to win against teams above 500. It seems they're 2-4 against teams above 500, but they're 5-0 against sub 500 teams. Well, guess what? 4-year remaining 5 opponents are sub 500 teams, so they should be able to pick up some wins there. I don't have to list these, but I will. Their opponents that I'm talking about there: Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit, and Atlanta once more for the sub 500 teams. They just have to get over Kansas City this week, which you can just scratch it down as a loss already. I'm telling you, I'm going with Kansas City. But to continue breaking them down for a minute, long term, all the game the other day was knock their Super Bowl odds. Like they're still primed to make the playoffs, and January is a new season, as we all say the whole time. They will enter the season with the monkey on their back that they probably can't beat these good teams because they'll lose to Kansas City now, and then their record will go in as 2-5 against teams above 500. But like, look who they're probably going to have to play. Like Green Bay, they've already beaten. New Orleans isn't a good matchup. They've been embarrassed by them twice, but potentially they learn from their mistakes. Seattle, Bruce Arians is good against. He was 4-1 in Seattle. We mentioned a few weeks ago Arizona was able to win in Seattle all those years under Bruce Arians. So Bruce Arians has and his staff, because they are all from Arizona, know how to play against Seattle. And even with bad years, when they were 7-8-1 and 8-8, they were able to beat Seattle in Seattle. It's just tough that the better passing teams in the league have been tough for the Bucs, namely the Saints and the Rams. So maybe that's bad. The LA Rams, they only lost it by a field goal. It might be the worst matchup if they go on to win the NFC West, which they could potentially do after the win the other day. Arizona, Chicago, Minnesota, any of those wildcard teams are not likely to meet because they will be wildcards. And then there's the NFC East too. The only thing that could go against them there is it's going to be a windy Philadelphia. It's in Philadelphia, or it could be Dallas. But I mean, it's likely if Tampa Bay is able to get the that top wildcard spot that they play the NFC East team, and then they're laughing. They're into a second round of the wildcards already. So another point I want to make, though, is about Tom Brady and these comments this week by Bruce Arians about, oh, he's just adjusting. So if he is just adjusting, the one thing he always said since Arizona, at least, and I started really paying attention, was that rookies have to be ready by Thanksgiving. So look, if you want to call Tom Brady like a rookie and that he's acclimatizing, he has to be able to perform by now. Now, this matchup against Patrick Mahomes should have been an absolute barn burner. You would have thought at the beginning of the year, Kansas City versus this high-powered Tampa Bay, it should have just been an absolute shootout. Forget about defense. But it doesn't look like it's going to be like that. And certainly doesn't look like it's going to be with the deep ball. That's where Tom Brady struggles have been this year, it seems. Next Gen Stats put out the numbers first earlier on. I think Hayden and myself behind the scenes to try to look into them, but they're able to come out with better numbers. Mine varied slightly. I have him going, Tom Brady going 16 on 37 through the first few weeks on air yards, on long balls, and he's only completed 2 of 16 recently. So, he's projected over that same course. The way he's going right now, I think he's completed on 1 of 8 passes that are beyond 20 yards, air yards, in the last few weeks. So Bruce Arians' philosophy is the long ball. Everything stems off the long ball and the threat of the long ball. So that's worrying for Tampa Bay, but it's one of their few worries because they do have that nice schedule coming up.
Yeah.
What I'm paying attention to is now, obviously, we're late to the party on the handshake. Obviously, that's been talked about all week. It's Friday by now. But if Brady loses this week, it's not on prime time, so obviously that's another thing. But does he shake Patrick Mahomes' hands? I'll be looking out for that.
Listen, this handshake thing has been building for weeks and weeks. And, it first started with Nick Foles on Thursday night when Foles once again beat Brady and Brady didn't shake his hand. And then he didn't shake Goff's hand after Goff finally got his revenge. So when Mahomes goes in there and beats the Bucs by 20, like I think they're going to do, is he going to shake Mahomes' hand? I doubt it, because Brady's kind of a sore loser. That's just who he's been his entire career, to be brutally honest with you, Mark. He's not used to these kind of struggles. So he's not going to go out there and congratulate the obviously best quarterback in the entire world right now. Like I just said, I expect the Mahomes-led Chiefs to win big because of the struggles on the deep ball, like Mark mentioned. don't trust the Bucs right now to necessarily keep pace with what the Chiefs are doing. And that's not a knock on the Bucs per se. It's just, I don't think I trust any team in the league to keep pace with Mahomes right now. And I'm going to take the Mahomes-led Chiefs big in this one.
Yeah, I think the pick this week might be whether we want to pick whether the handshake takes place. I'll say it does. You say it doesn't. That might be what makes it a bit more interesting. But hey, Brady's well able to play up in these kind of setups. I mean, yeah, it's not on prime time, but against Patrick Mahomes, like he must love that. This is two goats going against one another, potentially for the last time. Again, this is another game all year that I was excited for. So it looks like this theme has been let out a little bit before we get there. But I didn't mean to do it, but it's after being our last game on the show again. It's regardless of whether Tampa Bay are going in on fire. But again, they were hot a month ago, like super hot enough that they were like getting into that Super Bowl favorites contender race. Let's not write them off, even if they lose this game. I mean, like they've a handy schedule coming open. Yeah, they're well able for it. They still have all that talent, as we'd like to say.
They got all that talent. They got a soft schedule. And remember, the Saints are dealing with a backup quarterback right now. They can still win this division, people. They're still very much in the hunt. Don't count them out just yet. So that's the Week 12 preview show. Mark, thank you so much for doing this with me on this very sacred holiday of post-Thanksgiving. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, you'll have to go get yourself a turkey sandwich after all of this.
Lots of turkey. That's all I eat for like the next 5 days after Thanksgiving. Just nothing but turkey. So is there anything you want to say last call before we go?
Nope, that's it. We've kept the people now for an hour and 25 minutes, 2026. So
yeah, go back into your food comas.
I don't know what the break. I don't know if the breakdown is on the show yet. Are we European or American listeners? I'm going to say that we're. So I don't know if there's hangovers and that involved. Again, this isn't a holiday that I know how to participate in very well. Our own made up holiday, St. Patty's Day, is all about drinking, so we'd have a hangover. I don't know how you guys deal with it.
I think we need to do a side podcast on what Mark thinks is a made up holiday or not. I am so invested in this now. Like, this is great.
If we don't get to celebrate it, it must be made up. All right. I know. I just thought it was to put a bow on it. I thought that it was. I know it's supposed to be celebrating yourselves, but I thought it was becoming a marketing thing. I thought it was like Black Friday, an extra day of Black Friday it was turning into. I'm sorry for disrespecting a lot of Americans and generalizing. I understand the importance. I just didn't understand what it meant.
All right, welcome back to the Holiday and You podcast here, where we break down your favorite holidays and tell them if they're real or not. All right. Thank you for joining me, Mark, and everybody have a safe and fun post-Thanksgiving celebration. Go back into your food comas. That's Mark. I'm Hayden, and we'll see you all back here next week for Week 13. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye.